And now it's time to preview an upcoming game with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everyone, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to look at another Dice Tower preview. This time we're going to look at Dragon Racer. Now, Dragon Racer is a card game in which each player represents, well, a dragon racer who has a team of dragons that he is trying to do his best to maneuver around a racetrack. And that racetrack isn't already known what it is. The components of that will change as the game goes on, and you'll have to adjust accordingly. Now, the core mechanism of this game is going to be card drafting. Each player is going to be drafting cards to try and support their team of dragons and figure out how to best use these cards that they've drafted in order to make their usually sprinting dragons kind of do a little bit more marathon type race around the track. So real quick, why don't we take a look at what you're going to get inside of the box. We'll see how the game plays, and then we'll come back at the end and I'll sum it all up for you. So here you can see the components all set out for a 4-player game of Dragon Racer. Now I just want to note that right here you will see there are 8 trophy cards. You can play this game with up to 8 players depending on whether or not you have 2 sets of the game. So if you get 2 sets of the game, you can play 8 players. If you have 1 set of the game, you will have enough cards for 4 players. So right now we're just going to be using the first 4 trophy cards. Now, in addition, you'll see that each player out here has their own character card. These character cards are for the most part going to be the same, but you'll see that each one has an associated color, green, blue, red, and yellow, which will also correspond to the colors of the dragons in the game. You'll see we have green, red, blue, and yellow dragons. Each of these character cards also has an ability on it. So for example, the green ability says that you can move forward 3 spaces if you manage to score all of your dragons during the scoring phase. Or, if we look at the yellow one, it says that you may move forward 2 spaces each time you switch out one of your dragons on your team. So you have to switch for a different color, but as long as you switch one of your dragons for a different color, you get 2 spaces of movement. On each of these guys will have their own. So for example, red is move forward once each time you use one of the abilities of a dragon, and blue is move forward 1 extra space each time you win an affinity bonus, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. But essentially, each player is going to also start with a character card, and they're going to start with 3 level 1 dragons. Now these were dealt out randomly at the start of the game, but each player gets 3 dragons. You can tell they're level 1 because on the cards there is a little number right here. It says 1A. 1 is the level of the dragon, and A is the set of cards. Depending on how many players you're playing with, you'll remove specific sets of cards. So this player here has a green and 2 red. We can see 2 green and a yellow, 1 of each 3 different colors, and 2 blue and a yellow dealt out randomly. Each dragon card also has different statistics on it. One, they will each have a track type. This one is a Wormwoods dragon. Now, not all Wormwoods dragons are going to be green, but for right now they are. In addition, you will see that it has the green symbol, which is going to be a triangle, and then at the bottom it has a couple of numbers. One is its speed, and the other is how many symbols you must have in order to support that dragon. We'll talk about this very shortly. Now, each player is also going to have a disc out on the start space of Speed City, which is the first portion of the racetrack. This game is essentially going to be a drafting game where you're trying to get the appropriate cards in order to support your dragons and have the most of each different track type in order to get bonuses to advance out there. Each character card is going to give you a list of the phases. So first will be setup. And during the setup, you're going to redistribute the trophy cards to show the current winning order. So whoever's in first will get 1, whoever's in last will get 4, and the other players will get their appropriate trophies. During the first turn, you will shuffle these up and deal them out randomly. So we would have a turn order based on random distribution at the start of the game. In addition, on every turn except for the first, you're going to flip over the next piece of track. So we have 4 corners that are already set up, but the upper track will flip up on turns 2, 3, and 4, and the lower tracks will flip out on later turns. After we've done the setup, we're going to move on to the draft portion, which of course is the majority of the game. And depending on which round it is, you're going to get dealt more cards. In the first round, each player will be dealt 3, and they'll be passing their cards to the left. However, in the second round, you'll be dealt 4 and passed to the right, and then the next round, 1 more card and to the left, and alternating, getting more cards each round and passing to the opposite direction that you passed in the previous rounds. So each player would be dealt out in this round 3 cards in order to start their draft. So you'd see they'd all get their cards, and essentially they're going to start by doing a draft. Now, what you're looking at when you're drafting is that you need dragons that can support your team. Supporting dragons are oftentimes, and almost always, going to be of the same color, and they provide the units in the upper left-hand corner of their card. So for example, the Tempest Track Dragon here provides 1 blue in support. Now, this player doesn't need blue, so they're unlikely to draft that, but they do need red in support, so they may draft this Burning Spire Dragon, keeping it and then passing the remainder of their cards over to the left. In this way, you would keep drafting cards until you're done drafting. So real quick, I'm going to simulate a draft, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more. So each player has now drafted their 3 cards, taking one from their initial hand, then one from the set of 2 cards passed to them, and then finally being passed a 3rd card. And then we're going to start with scoring our cards with the last place player, and this will always be done from last to first place. So this player is going to pick up their cards and they're going to look at what they were able to draft, and it actually turned out quite well for them. So what they needed in order to support their dragons was they needed 2 red, one for each of these 2 dragons that require a red, and a green. Well, that is exactly what they drafted. So they would place a red here, a red there, and a green here to show they're supporting all 3 of their dragons. This will allow them to move 1, 2, 3 spaces. So green is going to move 1, 2, 3 spaces. In addition, green's ability says that if they manage to move all of their dragons or score all of their dragons during a scoring phase, they get to move an additional 3 spaces. So they're going to move 1, 2, 3 more, a good first round for green. After this player finishes, they can actually swap out one of their supporting dragons or a dragon they didn't even use if it was future rounds for a dragon in their team. So we have supporting dragons down here, but the dragons in their team here. Now, we can see that one of the dragons they have, or actually a couple of the dragons they have, are better than the ones they had before. This one right here has a speed of 3, but it requires 2 supporting green dragons in order to move. However, the other option is a red dragon that requires 2 supporting dragons with a movement of 3, and we're already doubled up on red. So perhaps they decide to switch this level 3 dragon for this level 1 dragon, adding them to their team. Now, they don't want to discard anything yet because there's additional scoring that can be done based on the different types of tracks that will score in the next phase. The next player here, number 3, would then take a look at their hand. And they'll see that they did not get everything they need in order to support their dragons. They have 2 yellow dragons, one of which can support one of their yellow dragons here, and they have a blue dragon, which can support either one of their blues out here. So maybe they decide to support this one here. Their 3rd card is, unfortunately, useless, so they're not going to get any benefit from that, but we'll set it aside to count for their collected draft during the track scoring phase. In this case, they are going to go ahead and they're going to move forward 2. So we can see that orange here, well, using orange for yellow, is going to move forward 2 spaces. Now, their ability says that if they swap out a dragon for a dragon of a different color, they get to move 2 additional. So what they could do, in theory, is swap out one of these level 2 yellow dragons for one of their blue dragons in order to get 2 additional spaces, moving up to 5. After that player is done, we're going to move on to our 2nd place player, and we'll take a look at what they drafted. Unfortunately, they got a very poor hand for what they needed. So, they're going to use one of their blue dragons to support their blue, but the other 2 aren't able to support anyone and will be set aside. In this case, they're only going to get to move forward 1 space, so red advances to space 2. If we look at their ability, that says that if they use dragons for abilities, they can move forward extra spaces each time they do that. But none of these dragons have abilities printed on them. We'll show you those dragons in a little bit. Our final player, the player in position 1, drafted relatively well. They decided that they were going to draft 2 green and a blue. They must not have had a chance for a yellow. So they're going to support their 2 green dragons here. The blue will do nothing for them, and they will advance 2 spaces on the track. Their ability, when we look at it, says that they move forward 1 space each time that they win an affinity bonus, and we'll talk about that right now. Each of these last 2 players could have also switched out their dragons, like we showed earlier, in order to advance their team, making them slightly better for future rounds. So perhaps this player switches out the yellow for a blue. Now that we've completed the dragon scoring phase, we're going to move on to the tracks phase. And in the tracks phase, each specific type of track, which is going to be Speed City, Wormwoods, Burning Spire, and Tempest track, are going to score out. And at this point in the game, they're all color-coded. So right now, essentially what we're going to look at is who has the most of each color of card. And we can start with Speed City. So we can see that this player right here has 3 yellow cards, which is more than anyone else. In the first round, the bonus for the track is 1 space. So we'll see that this player is going to get to move 1 space on the track for having the most of that type of card, Speed City. We can then go to green, and we see that player over here has 4 green cards, more than everyone else, and that is the blue player. So the blue player is going to get to move forward 1 space. However, their bonus on their card says that each time they get one of these track bonuses, they can move forward an extra space. So they actually get to move 2. Once we move on to the red one, we can see that our green player has the most red cards, so they're going to move forward 1 space. And finally, we're going to take a look at blue cards, and we can see that there's a tie, 1, 2, 3, to 1, 2, 3 between the orange and the red players. Usually, this would see the number of points being dropped down to 1 for every player, because as you go through the game, in different rounds, these track bonuses become worth more and more points, 1 all the way up to 3 by the end of the 9th round. However, since it's only worth 1 right now, each player is going to get their 1 point of movement along the track. Once we've completed the track scoring, we're going to clean up all of the extra cards, and essentially everyone keeps only the 3 cards that are a part of their team. So we would remove all of the extra cards and add them back into the deck of cards that weren't already dealt out. We would then begin the next round starting with the setup phase. And of course, we're going to reassign our trophies to the order that they go in. So now green is going to be number 1, orange or yellow is going to be number 2, blue will be number 3, and red will be number 4 based on their positions on the track. And this means that red will be the first one to act when we do the scoring. In addition, we're going to flip up the first track out here. And we're going to see that this is another track called Worm Woods. Now we see we already have one Worm Woods, and now we have a red Worm Woods. What we're going to do here is we're going to go through the level 3 set of cards. 1 and 2 are already in the deck, but we're going to go through level 3, and we're going to find the appropriate cards of Worm Woods. Those are 4. They're right here. We're going to grab the level 3 Worm Woods cards. Now you'll see that these cards are not the same as the level 1 and 2. Some of them are, they have 2 support and move 3, but some of them need 3 support and move 6. Others will have abilities printed on them, and these abilities get progressively better throughout the game. This one says that target dragon requires +1 to score, but you move forward 1 space for playing this on somebody else. Now this is the ability of the red player. Using these cards in this manner, playing them on someone else's dragons to make them harder to support, will not only allow them to move forward 1 space on the track, but will also get them an extra space for doing this because that's their ability. So they may want to specially draft these cards in order to get that extra movement throughout the game. These cards are going to get added into the deck, so they'll be shuffled in with the already existing cards and available for drafting in the next round. With this, you'll see that we now have to pay more attention to who's going to get the Wormwood's track bonus, because not only the green Wormwood cards, but also the red Wormwood cards are going to contribute to getting that track bonus in the next round. With this next round, you're going to, of course, deal out 4 cards to each player this time, and you will draft to the right. And at the end of the round, the track bonuses for each different track type will be worth 2 points. So you can move along a little bit faster, accelerating along. You're going to keep on in this manner, rearranging the order of players, dealing out new cards, drafting them in order to support your dragons, and of course improving your team of dragons, and then getting the track bonuses and moving along the racetrack. Until the next round, at which point you will flip out a new piece of track. We have now a Tempest track to match our blue one, and you're going to do this for 7 rounds of the game, all the way up to 9 dealt cards. And so you'll know that the game is going to end when you flip the last track. By the end of the game, you're hoping to have advanced the furthest along this track. And the player who has gone furthest along this track by best collecting their set of dragons, upgrading them, supporting them, utilizing the track abilities, and their own character abilities will be the winner. And there you have it. That is Dragon Racer, a game for 2 to 8 players in which you're drafting cards in order to try and get your dragons around a racetrack faster than everyone else. Now this game is relatively simple at its core. Of course, you're drafting cards, picking one and passing them to your neighbor in order to try and power your team of 3 dragons. But which dragons you have on your team can be changed throughout the game, and how you use the cards you drafted can kind of change your strategy. Sometimes, depending on which character you have in the game, and each character has a different ability, you may want to keep a slower, generally speaking, team of dragons, and make sure you supply all of them in order to get a special bonus that one of the characters has. Other people may want to try and rush forward or get a bunch of dragon cards that have an ability, as they get special bonuses for using cards with abilities on their opponents. Some people are going to want to change the dragons out in their team very frequently, and so depending on what ability you have for your character, it's going to change how you're going to play this game. In addition, you have to pay attention to what the names or the types of dragons are that you're drafting, because each different track type will score you extra bonuses at the end of a round. So collecting the most of a particular type of dragon, even though it may not be something you particularly need, can give you a bonus to try and race towards that end. So overall, several things you need to pay attention to in this game in order to be successful. If that sounds good to you, check it out. Check out their Kickstarter page. I'm sure they'd be happy to have your support.
Thanks for watching our review today. For more information about board games, as well as the #1 board game audio podcast, check out Dicetower.com for reviews, interviews, and more. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.